The sound came first, a metallic rattle that traveled through the fuselage like an angry shiver. Officer Daniel Cole sat strapped into his seat in the back of the SWAT helicopter, the weight of his gear pressing into his shoulders, the headset clamped tight against his ears. The blades above hammered the night sky, steady at first, then stuttering as the machine lurched against an unseen current. The smell of hydraulic oil and recycled air filled the cabin, sharp, mechanical, suffocating. They were flying over the outskirts of Cleveland, on their way to support a high-risk warrant. Nothing extraordinary. Cole had done dozens of these flights. But tonight, the air felt wrong. Thick, heavy. The seatbelt light blinked in red across the narrow panel, as if mocking the word safe. His partner, Officer Raymond Holt, glanced at him through the dim light. No words passed, just the silent acknowledgement of men who knew turbulence was routine, but still unsettling when it hit with force. The helicopter dropped suddenly, a gut-punching fall that made Cole's stomach slam against his ribcage. He clutched the seat frame. The pilot's voice crackled through the comms, tight and controlled. "Hold on! We're hitting unexpected shear." The machine groaned as though it might break apart, the frame rattling against the wind. Cole closed his eyes for a moment, pressing his lips together. He wasn't afraid of flying. He was afraid of what he couldn't control. The storm building below them wasn't on. The forecast. He could see flashes through the tinted windows, not lightning, at least not the kind he knew. Strange bursts, like thin vertical shafts of white, piercing the night. A surge of panic crawled up his spine. The cabin was alive with vibration, every rivet clanging like a drum. The team's tactical gear swayed on its straps. Cole could hear someone behind him whispering, a nervous prayer, barely audible through the noise. "Lord, keep us steady." Another drop, a harder one. Holt's hand shot out, gripping Cole's arm with a force that betrayed his fear. In Holt's eyes was the raw truth every officer hides under the armor. They were mortal men, hanging by bolts and blades in a storm. And then, through the window, Cole saw it. Not lightning, not aircraft lights. A cross of light, subtle, almost transparent, hovering in the distance, suspended in the dark sky. He blinked hard, thinking his mind was inventing shapes out of fear. But the form held. Vertical and horizontal beams, pale and steady, untouched by the turbulence around them. His breath caught, his throat tightened as though something pressed against it. He didn't speak, didn't dare. Holt followed his gaze and froze, his mouth parting. The pilot's voice stuttered over the comms. "What is that?" The helicopter jolted again, the tail yawing slightly, but no one moved. The rattle of the cabin faded beneath the pounding of hearts. Cole's pulse surged in his temples. A strange calm swept through him. Not safety, not yet, but a pull deeper than fear. The kind of silence that comes before a confession, before truth has to be faced. This was no routine flight anymore. The air itself felt charged, not just with storm, but with presence. If you're reading this and you felt that cold edge of fear, that helpless second when life could break apart, stay with this story. Subscribe, follow, keep close. What happened aboard this flight is something you may never forget. The cross of light hung steady in the storm, and the men of steel and Kevlar were suddenly just men again. The helicopter bucked hard to the left, a slap of air that threw everyone against their harnesses. Daniel's headset cut with a burst of static, then the pilot's voice rose sharp through the noise. "This is Air 1, Bell 407, 3000 MSL, experiencing moderate to severe chop. Request vectors." Her tone was steady, but her breath was quick. Daniel read the name tape when she twisted in the seat. M. Ruiz. The crew, chief beside her, B. Keller, kept one hand braced on the console, the other checking the panel as if he could hold the numbers still with his fingers. The cabin smelled like metal and sweat. The recycled air blew cold across Daniel's neck, drying his lips. His knee bounced until he stilled it with a flat palm. Ray Holt gripped the frame again, knuckles pale. "We're good," Ray said, though his voice was too tight to sell it. Their rifles were bagged and strapped. The bags thudded softly with each hit of turbulence. like a slow, dull heartbeat in the dark. Cleveland approach crackled into their headsets. Air 1, wind shear advisories in effect. Microburst reported near the river corridor. Recommend holding or diverting. Ruiz answered, negative on divert for now. We've got ground units staging. Request hold to re-evaluate. She glanced over her shoulder. Even through the dim red wash of the cockpit lights, Daniel could see the question in her eyes. Can you do this? He lifted a thumb he didn't fully believe. The red seatbelt sign glowed and flickered as if the air itself shook the wiring. Another drop, sudden and mean, drove a grunt out of Keller. The tail swayed, the rotors thrashed louder, the blades beating the sky with a heavy, strained rhythm. Daniel looked right, forcing his breath slow, and there it was again. The cross of light hung out beyond the glass, faint but unmistakable, a vertical line with a thinner bar draped across it. It didn't flare like the anti-collision strobe. It didn't blink like tower beacons. It hovered where the dark was thickest. He swallowed and told himself to find the source. Maybe their searchlight was bleeding through the mist. Maybe streetlights below were reflecting off ice crystals. He tried to name it so he wouldn't have to feel it. Do you see that? Ray asked, not whispering now. Keller turned, followed their gaze, and went still. Ruiz didn't look. Her hands were full of sky. Focus up, gentlemen, she said, not unkindly. I need quiet. Daniel should have looked away. He should have checked his gear again or the map band on his arm. But as the helicopter trembled around him, a memory surfaced like a face underwater. His mother at the kitchen table, hands folded, voice low, "Do not be afraid." He hadn't prayed in years. Faith had felt like a story told to children so they could sleep. He stared through the glass and felt shame and longing arrive together, uninvited and heavy. The cross brightened, only slightly, as if the clouds thinned around it. Daniel didn't think of miracles. He thought of fatigue and storm layers and tricks of distance. Yet the thing steadied him in a way he couldn't explain. His breath evened. The fear didn't vanish. It settled into a place where he could hold it without choking. "Air 1, you're drifting," Approach warned. Ruiz corrected with a firm pedal press. "Copy." The skids trembled. The whole frame buzzed through the seat like a low-voltage current. Daniel's teeth clicked on a hard bump. Ray muttered, "Jesus," not as a curse but as a plea. The word filled the cabin for a second and lingered longer than sound should. Daniel angled his head, careful not to unbuckle, and looked again. The cross was not closer. It wasn't dramatic. It just existed where nothing should feel steady. A thought pressed through like a hand on his back. "If you're there, I'm listening." He didn't move his lips. He didn't want the others to see him pray. He just formed the words and let them. "See it?" Keller finally spoke. "Could be a light pillar," he said like he was reminding himself. "Ice crystals. City glare." Ray nodded too fast. "Yeah, ice." No one sounded convinced. No one sounded ready to call it anything else either. They let the explanation lie on the floor between their boots like a tool they might use later. Ruiz held them in a slow orbit, checking instruments, watching for calmer air. "We'll hold 5, she said. "If it doesn't settle, we divert. I'm not fighting a microburst over roofs." Her voice dropped at the end, a private vow that arrived on their frequency anyway. Daniel respected her for it. Professionals told the truth, even when it tasted like failure. He stared at the cross until the rotor wash made his eyes water. He blinked and it was still there. He realized how tired he was of bracing himself against everything, against the air, against the job, against the idea that life could end without warning and leave too many words unsaid. He felt the straps cross his chest. He pressed them down and breathed under their weight. Outside, the storm shuffled and growled. Inside, the men tried to be small enough to survive it. The cross waited, unbothered by wind or reason. Daniel didn't ask for a sign. He asked for honesty, for courage quiet enough to hear itself. He lowered his head a fraction, and in the rattling noise that passed for silence up there, he told the truth he'd dodged. "I'm scared. Help me do this right." The helicopter eased a little, not calm, just less violent. Ruiz exhaled. "That's better." Approach confirmed a slight improvement ahead. Daniel kept his eyes forward now. He didn't need to keep checking the light to know it remained. He could feel the idea of it, steady, simple, unforced, like a palm over his heartbeat. They weren't saved. They weren't safe. But something had shifted, and it wasn't the wind. The storm thickened again, rolling across the helicopter's path like a wall. Ruiz steadied her grip, knuckles tight on the cyclic, voice clipped. "Brace, we're in it." Her words carried no drama, just fact. The rotors chopped into heavy air, and the machine lurched with each strike of turbulence. Daniel's helmet vibrated against his skull. He could hear every bolt in the frame shudder. The headset smelled faintly of old sweat and plastic. The recycled air turned sour, heavy with fear that had no scent but filled the lungs anyway. Across from him, Ray shifted, shoulders broad but slumped under the invisible weight pressing them down. He mouthed something Daniel couldn't hear, then closed his eyes, lips still moving. A prayer, or just a string of words to survive the moment. Daniel had always hated this part of flying, the helplessness. On the ground he could fight, push, hold, make a difference. Up here he was strapped to a vibrating seat in a machine that answered only to wind and skill. He trusted Ruiz. He trusted Keller. But when the air had a mind of its own, trust felt like paper in a flood. Air 1 winds at surface gusting 28. Possible funneling near lakefront, approach reported. Static chewed the edges of the words. Ruiz responded, calm. Copy, extending hold. Another slam. The helicopter dropped, stomachs left behind. Daniel grunted against the belt. Ray cursed sharp, then bit it back. The gear bags clattered again. Someone's carbine muzzle tapped the wall with a hollow knock. Through the small round window at his side, Daniel saw the faint cross again. It didn't flare. It didn't call attention. It just remained. The light wasn't brighter than the storm. It wasn't louder than the thunder that rolled somewhere below. But it was there, unbroken, where the sky should have been empty. Daniel pressed his helmet back, jaw set. He told himself it had to be an effect, refraction, glare. He thought of physics, not scripture. Still, his chest tightened with something he didn't want to name. Ray caught his stare. His eyes were wet, not from fear alone. "You..." "See it too," Ray said into the comm. Not a question, a statement. Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. The words lodged behind his teeth. He had seen too many men mocked for faith, too many prayers met with silence. Yet now, strapped into a shaking cage of metal, he couldn't deny what he saw. Ruiz kept her gaze forward, not turning, not asking. She needed her world reduced to dials and horizon lines. Daniel respected that, but Keller's head tilted, just slightly, and Daniel knew the crew chief had seen it as well. His mouth pressed shut, as if holding the sight inside. The silence among them grew heavier than the storm's roar. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something they didn't know how to carry. Daniel felt a memory rise again. His father's funeral, the pastor saying, "The world shakes, but he is steady." Daniel had rolled his eyes back then. Now, sweat dripping from his brow, shoulders pressed into the seat, he wished he could summon that same certainty. The helicopter jerked left, then right, rotors clawing for balance. Ruiz's voice cut hard. "Stay with me." Daniel braced, forcing himself to breathe. His pulse thudded against the strap across his chest. He tried to think of the mission, the reason for the flight. A suspect with rifles and warrants, ground units waiting. But the reason shrank against the storm and the light outside. He wanted to believe the cross was coincidence. He wanted to dismiss it, because believing meant facing everything he'd buried for years. Yet each time he looked, it was still there, patient and quiet. The storm had a voice, metal against air, thunder rolling, men breathing too loud. But beneath it, Daniel felt another voice, not spoken, not heard, but steady in its insistence. "You're not alone." He clenched his fists against his thighs. Fear remained, hot and bitter. But beside it now was something else. A weight that wasn't crushing, but grounding. He bowed his head, just a fraction, and didn't bother with words this time. The silence was enough. Outside, the cross didn't move. Inside, the men felt smaller and strangely less alone. They orbited over the river corridor, a slow, uneasy circle cut into the night. Ruiz kept the nose angled into the wind, chasing a sliver of smoother air the way a tired driver hunts a lane without potholes. The engine's pitch rose and fell with the gusts, a strained hum that settled into Daniel's chest and would not leave. Sweat gathered under his vest, despite the cold air blowing through the vents. He tasted metal on his tongue, the ghost of hydraulic fluid and fear. Air 1, status. Dispatch came in flat and businesslike. Keller answered before Ruiz could, giving the truth stripped of pride. Holding. Severe chop. Ground units staged. We may divert. The words hung there. No one wanted them, but they were real. Ray tracked the city grid below through the window, a patchwork of sodium lamps blurred by low scud. Feels like we're suspended over a map, he muttered. Daniel followed the glow of headlights moving along the highway, ants dragging light behind them. Normal life continued, steady and indifferent. Up here, they were a small problem in bad air. The cross of light held its place off their 2 o'clock, pale and steady. It didn't speak. It didn't move closer. It simply existed, like a mark on the sky made by something that understood lines better than the storm did. Daniel kept stealing glances, embarrassed by his need to confirm it. Hadn't vanished. Ruiz took another call. Air 1, latest cell moving east. Microburst reported dissipating. Approach paused. Caution still advised. Ruiz exhaled. Copy. She rotated them a hair, checking torque. The pedals trembled under her boots. The cyclic quivered in her grip. She didn't fight the air, she negotiated with it, firm and polite. Daniel's phone, strapped inside his vest, buzzed once with a message he would not read. His sister, asking if he could come to his nephew's game. This Saturday. A normal request from a normal life that felt a continent away, even though they were only a few thousand feet over Ohio. He pictured his nephew's small hands on a plastic bat and felt something in him soften, then tighten again as the helicopter dropped 3 feet and caught itself with an offended shudder. Keller leaned toward them, voice low. I saw it too, he said, as if confessing. The cross. He didn't offer explanations this time. No talk of ice crystals. Just a fact he was done arguing with. Ray nodded, jaw clenched. I don't know what to do with that. Keller's eyes flicked toward the cockpit. We do the job, he said softly, and we don't lie to ourselves about what we saw. The storm hissed across the windshield, thin drizzle driven horizontal. The wipers ticked a slow, stubborn rhythm. Ruiz spoke without turning. I don't need speculation in the back. I need quiet ears and clear hands. Her tone was not harsh, just resolved. Daniel respected her even more. For it, Faith could not fly the helicopter. Skill would. He lowered his gaze to his gloves, turned one palm up like he'd forgotten what hands were for. He remembered Sunday school pictures, cheap prints of a man with kind eyes. He remembered telling himself he'd grown out of such things. He remembered the night shift, the body in the alley, the way he had refused to pray because he didn't want to owe anyone for surviving. He remembered all of it as the rotors beat time over his head. The cross stayed. It neither demanded nor promised. Daniel found relief in that. He didn't want a spectacle. He wanted a center. He swallowed and spoke on the private crew net, voice small. Permission to say something real quick. Ruiz hesitated, then, make it short. He cleared his throat, feeling foolish. I don't know what that light is. Might be physics. Might be something else. But I'm scared. If anyone wants to... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't say pray. He let the word hang unspoken, as if saying it would risk turning this into theater. Keller surprised him. I'll take quiet, the crew chief said. Ray added, me too. Ruiz said nothing, but she didn't cut their mic. The helicopter thumped through another band of rough air, and for 3 long breaths the men in the back lowered their heads. No speeches, no deals with heaven, just the honesty of small words inside bigger noise. Help us do this right. Keep us steady. Let us get everyone home. The air did not clear. The light did. Not surge. The mission did not magically simplify, but the cabin changed by a degree only they could feel. Fear was still there, but it was sorted now, labeled and set on a shelf where it could be found without knocking everything else over. Air 1, approach, the radio cut in. Cell has moved east of your position. Winds trending down to 20. Advise. Ruiz looked over the instruments, then at the map. We'll proceed to secondary LZ, she said. Safer ingress. She gave the helicopter a gentle nudge forward, easing them out of the hold. They tracked north of the planned route, buying a margin the way a cautious driver buys time with a wider turn. Below, the river bent like a dark wire. The cross of light slid off the edge of Daniel's window as their heading changed. He felt an urge to reach for it as if it was something he could pocket. He forced his hands to stay still. Ray tapped his arm. Whatever that was, it helped, he said. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. He wasn't fixed. He wasn't brave all at once, but a thin, durable calm had threaded through the noise, and it held even when the helicopter trembled again. Ruiz brought them lower, trading altitude for a bit more control. The city grew edges, roofs sharpened. The reflection of their moving light chased itself along puddled tar. Keller called out wires, towers, the ghost snag hazards that wait for tired pilots. All ordinary, all dangerous. As they approached the new LZ, a school field boxed in by chain link. Daniel glanced one last time toward where the cross had been. The sky there was only sky now, dark and empty. He didn't feel abandoned. He felt trusted, as if the quiet moment had ended because it had done its work. They were still a long way from safe, but something was steadier than before, and it wasn't the weather. The school field was a wet rectangle boxed by chain link and power lines. Keller called hazards fast. Lines south and east, light poles by third base, wind variable. Ruiz kept a shallow approach, feet tapping the pedals, hands steady. The helicopter shivered. The engine note deepened as she bled speed without giving up control. Through the plexiglass, Daniel saw dark roofs, dumpsters, parked cars slick with rain, and a brick building with yellow windows. The smell shifted with altitude, less cold metal, more wet dirt. Rain ticked harder. The wipers squeaked. Ground, be advised, Keller radioed. Inbound to secondary, perimeter tight. A reply snapped back. Copy, Air 1, streetlight out northeast corner, gates open. A gust nudged them. The skids wagged. Daniel let the belt bite his chest and took it. Ray checked his glove twice, small rituals to choke off panic. Wires, Keller warned. Ruiz already had them mapped, thin, black, waiting. She eased into a hover over the outfield. Rotor wash flattened grass in circles. The cross of light was out of sight now. Daniel didn't hunt for it. He held its shape in his head, not as a promise, but as a straight line to breathe by. Down across steady. Wind shift, Keller called. Ruiz corrected with a small pedal input. I've got it. She slid them sideways, a crab walk toward the infield, where the ground looked less torn. We set down a minute, she said. Let the worst pass. Then we try the run. The skids tasted dirt, floated, then kissed again. Ruiz didn't commit. She tested the gust and waited. Daniel watched her knuckles under the red glow, pale, not shaking. Approach returned. Air 1. Rain ban through in 2 minutes. Trend improves. Ground says suspect is quiet. Possible stand down. Ruiz exhaled. Copy. They touched. Not clean, not hard, just contact. The cabin vibrated differently with the skids on Earth, a deeper hum that climbed the seat into the spine. Hold it light, Keller said. Ruiz kept them perched, ready to leap if the wind punched again. Grass whipped and sprang back. Ray leaned close. When we lift again, he said, I can't go up with the same fear. Daniel nodded. Put it down now. The word surprised him by being true. Ray closed his eyes. Surrender and relief shared the same breath. No kneeling, no show. Just a moment while the machine bellowed and rain pecked at the skin. Daniel didn't try to sound brave. If you're here, stay. If not, let truth keep us honest. Help her hands. Help our feet. A gust pushed the disc. The helicopter rocked, then steadied. Ruiz lifted a hair to ease the struts. 1 minute, she said, finally glancing back. Whatever that light was, thanks for keeping your heads. Daniel looked to a gray at the edge of the cloud. No sign, no glow. Workable weather and work to do. Patrols at the gate, Keller said. Clean path. The cabin shook in a familiar way. Daniel checked his harness. He didn't fight fear. He accepted its weight and leaned forward anyway. The cross he carried now wasn't on the sky, but inside the small place he'd made for it. Ruiz lifted them off the field and turned the nose toward the job. The helicopter lifted from the wet field with a growl, rotors slicing damp air that slapped back into the cabin. Ruiz held them steady, her shoulders set like stone. Rain streaked across the plexiglass in diagonal lines, breaking into beads under the wash of the wipers. Air 1 cleared to proceed, approach confirmed. Keller replied crisp, then scanned outside, eyes hungry for wires, antennas, anything thin and lethal. Lines at 2 o'clock, keep it north, he said. Ruiz nodded without looking, nose turning gently until the field lights fell behind them. Daniel braced against the frame, watching the city crawl beneath. Rows of houses pressed shoulder to shoulder, driveways glistening like mirrors. Street lamps swayed in the gusts, halos trembling in the mist. He smelled damp concrete through the vents, faint but distinct, the smell of rain-soaked neighborhoods he'd walked 100 times. Normal life still beat below while they clawed through sky. Ray broke the silence. Dispatch says, subjects inside. No movement. He swallowed. Ground wants us on standby, eyes in the sky, nothing more yet. Ruiz gave a short reply. Then we'll hover, but if these winds pick back up, we divert. She meant it. Daniel respected her for drawing that line. Pride killed, caution saved. The helicopter hovered low over a 4-lane street, the rotor wash chasing litter in small cyclones. Keller read off distances. Pole left, roof vent right, holding altitude. His voice was a lifeline, a steady drumbeat against panic. Daniel's eyes found the window again. No cross, no light, just storm and city glow. Still, the memory of it clung to him like a handprint that didn't fade after the grip was gone. He didn't chase it. He let it sit in the back of his mind, quiet and steady. The cabin rattled with another blast of turbulence. Daniel's teeth clicked hard. Ruiz muttered, "Stay with me, girl," patting the cyclic as if calming a horse. The helicopter shivered, but held. Daniel found himself whispering words he hadn't planned. Thank you. No address, no title, just thanks into the roar of blades. Ray noticed. He didn't smirk. He only nodded, a small acknowledgement between men who usually never spoke of such things. The silence afterward was heavier, but not hopeless. Below, patrol cars boxed the block in blue light. Officers stood in clusters, raincoats shining, radios flashing on shoulders. From above they looked small, fragile, yet determined. Daniel thought of how every uniform carried a story. Broken marriages, sleepless nights, tired faith. He wondered how many of them prayed in their cars before rolling out. He wondered how many hid fear under clipped radio calls. The helicopter shifted into a slow orbit. The storm wasn't gone, but it had eased enough to let the mission breathe. Still, the tension stayed thick. The men in the back said little, their hands tight on straps, their eyes tracking the block below. Daniel felt calm and fear sitting side by side inside him, not fighting each other anymore. He realized that maybe faith wasn't about removing fear, but about holding it without being crushed. The thought was plain, not poetic, but it stayed. Keller's voice snapped sharp. Object high, left, balloon maybe, or trash. Ruiz adjusted a hair, giving it space. A plastic bag whipped past the cockpit, caught in the rotor wash and torn to shreds. For a moment, it looked like pale ribbons drifting, and Daniel thought of torn pages. He blinked, and they were gone. No visions now. Just work. Just steadying breaths and the constant hum of the engine. Yet deep inside, Daniel carried the memory of light, as if it had left something behind, invisible, but real. The helicopter kept circling, blades thundering through damp sky, men silent, hearts louder than radios. "Air 1, hold north of the target. Units requesting a light pass over the rear alley," dispatch said. Ruiz glanced at Keller. He already had the map up on his kneeboard. "Alley runs east-west. Behind the duplex," he said. "Telephone lines crisscrossed. Recommend 50 feet above roofline minimum." Ruiz nodded once. "We'll give them one pass. If the wind hits like before, we're done." Daniel felt the cabin tighten around them. The smell of plastic and damp fabric filled his headset. He could taste dust from the seat foam on the back of his tongue. The rotor beat slowed as Ruiz bled speed. The helicopter tipped into a nose-left crab, sliding over rooftops as if the city had shifted. Under them, rain ticked, then hissed as a gust drove it sideways. Ray pointed. "There, 2 houses past the blue tarp." Keller leaned out, harness locked, scanning the shadows. He flipped the searchlight and knuckled the controller, painting a white oval across the alley. Trash cans skittered. A cardboard box toppled and flapped like a trapped bird. "Ground, you're lit," Keller said. "Alley clear for 30 yards. Voices crackled back in a rush of clipped words and street names. Daniel watched. The beam move and felt his stomach track the helicopter's micro-motions, the tiny, constant corrections that kept them level over wires strung like invisible snares. The wind stiffened. The skids wobbled. Ruiz kept the disc in trim, feet quick, hands patient. "She's twitchy," she muttered. Daniel heard the strain in the engine's note, a tight, higher edge like a violin string pulled too far. The seat shook from the tail rotor's work, a rough buzz that crawled up his spine. "Contact!" A ground. Voice barked. Back window flicker, possible movement. Keller narrowed the beam, tightening light on the second story. A curtain breathed in and out, as if the house itself were worried. Daniel wiped his forehead and felt cold sweat. "Fuel state?" Ruiz asked, eyes never leaving the numbers. Keller answered, 1 hour 10. "Enough, but not for games." Ruiz said, "Copy. 1 more block east, then we exit." They slid along the alley. A dark tangle of lines rose in the wind like ropes waking up. Keller called, "Wires 1 o'clock." Ruiz dipped a hair, then rose, finding a safer slice of air. Daniel's teeth clicked. He looked right, out to where the night opened, and saw it again. The cross of light, faint, thinner than before, as if drawn with a dull pencil on glass. It hovered beyond the edge of the neighborhood where the cloud deck broke into a lighter smear. Not bright, not dramatic, just there. He didn't point. He didn't speak. He swallowed and let his shoulders drop a fraction. "That what you do when you stop pretending you don't need help." Ray breathed in hard. "Do you—" He stopped, checking the job first. Movement confirmed, hands visible. Ground voices rose, commands shouted, a door creaking, the slap of boots in puddles. Keller widened the beam a touch, giving officers a clearer stage without blinding them. A new gust hit from the west, a blunt shove that tipped the disc. The cabin rolled, not far, but fast enough that every harness groaned. The cyclic shivered in. Ruiz's hand. She caught the roll and flattened them with a sharp pedal and a lift of collective. Something loose clattered against the deck. Daniel's breath punched out in a grunt. "Microburst echo," Approach warned. "Radar shows outflow near your position." Ruiz's voice stayed level. "We feel it." She looked left, then right, reading darkness like text. "We're exiting the alley." Keller killed the beam. The alley dropped into shadow again, leaving only the rain-glossed shapes of dumpsters and fences. Ground came back frantic and then soft. "Subject compliant. Hands where we can see them. Slow walk. Thank you, Air 1. Ruiz didn't answer. She had her own work to finish. A slow ascent over wires, a shallow turn toward open air, a controlled retreat from everything that could hook a skid or bite a tail. Daniel checked the window one more time. The cross was still there, steady in the little break. He did not mistake it for rescue. He took it as company. He let that be enough. Ray shifted closer, the headset foam brushing Daniel's cheek. "I used to pray before every shift," he said, his voice low and plain. "Stopped after my divorce. Felt stupid talking to someone who didn't fix the things I wanted fixed. He paused. I'm saying it again, not for fixes, just to say I'm here. Daniel nodded without turning. Me too. The words were small, but they changed the way he held the belt. Keller leaned back in, latching the side window. That'll do, he said to no one, or maybe to the sky. Ruiz climbed to a cleaner band of air, the rotors sounding less angry by degrees. The city fell away into pattern again. Grids, rivers, halos of lots, long tires of light on the interstate. Normal life resumed below like a song that never really stops. Air 1, you're clear to RTB or remain on station, dispatch offered. Ruiz looked at the instrument panel, then at the weather that still had hands. We'll loiter 5, high and north, she said. If it kicks, we're gone. They leveled, off. The helicopter hummed like a machine that remembered how to trust itself. Daniel closed his eyes for 3 breaths and saw the cross like a simple drawing left on a fridge. Ordinary, stubborn, honest. He opened them to rain and glass and the steady hands of a pilot who had chosen caution over pride. Nothing had been solved. The wind still prowled. The work wasn't done. But between the hard noise of the rotors and the soft noise of rain, something steady kept time. It wasn't loud. It was enough to hold on to. The storm loosened its grip but never left. Pockets of calmer air teased them, then snapped into bumps that jarred teeth and rattled gear. Ruiz kept the helicopter in a high circle north of the target block, far enough to dodge wires, close enough to remain useful. The instrument lights painted her face in thin green lines. Sweat marked her temples, though the cabin air was cool. Keller leaned on the frame, binoculars up. Ground units consolidating. Suspect cuffed, walking. Hout! His tone stayed clipped, but Daniel heard the relief tucked under it. The orbit tightened slightly, rotors chopping air steady, but strained. Daniel watched the scene below. Patrol cars boxed the block with strobes. Officers moved in the rain, their jackets bright in the searchlights from cruisers. A figure in a grey hoodie walked between them, wrists locked, head bowed. Daniel felt no victory, only the quiet exhaustion of men finishing a dangerous job. Ray muttered, "All that for one guy." Daniel didn't answer. He knew what Ray meant. Hours of planning, dozens of lives at risk, all balanced against the choices of one man. That was the work. They didn't choose scale, only response. The turbulence dipped again. Daniel's stomach lurched, hands tightening on his harness. He fought to steady his breath. He expected panic to rise sharp, but it didn't. The fear came, sat heavy, then held still. It was different now, contained. He let it be. His eyes searched the horizon through the scratched plexiglass. Clouds shifted and opened briefly, a window cut by the wind. Through it, faint and far, the cross of light remained. Dimmer, stretched by distance, but real enough to make his throat dry. He hadn't realized how badly he wanted to know it was still there. Ray followed his gaze and exhaled through his nose. It's not leaving. Daniel said nothing, but the thought circled in his head. Maybe it never was about leaving or staying. Maybe it was about us noticing. Keller broke the moment. Dispatch says we're cleared to return base, weather trending down. Ruiz shifted her grip and gave a short, professional reply. Air 1 copies, RTB. The helicopter banked gently, nose turning toward the west. The change in heading tilted the horizon, city lights sliding across the window like spilled stars. The hum of the engine evened. The storm wasn't gone, but it wasn't hunting them anymore. Daniel felt the change inside the cabin, too. Men breathed deeper, shoulders lowered. The silence was no longer suffocating but restful. Even the smell seemed different, less sharp, more like wet air than trapped fear. He closed his eyes, picturing his nephew's game, his sister's smile, the Sunday dinners he always skipped with excuses. For the first time in years, he thought maybe showing up mattered more than pretending he had nothing to bring. The cross hadn't promised safety. It hadn't solved the storm. It had only stood still when everything else shook. Maybe that was enough to remember. Ray spoke over the private net, voice tired but raw. If I wake up tomorrow, I'm calling my kid. Haven't talked in 6 months. No reason, just pride. Daniel opened his eyes. Do it, he said, his voice rough. Do it before you forget how scared you felt tonight. The helicopter hummed, rotors thrashing slower as Ruiz trimmed for the return leg. Rain eased into mist. The city blurred into dark fields and long stretches of highway. Daniel leaned back into his seat. He didn't chase the light anymore. He carried it plain and heavy, somewhere deeper than his chest. The nose came around slow, the city sliding to their left as Ruiz pointed them toward home. Rain thinned to mist. The air still had teeth, but it bit less often. The engine's whine settled into a hard, dependable tone that filled the cabin like a generator in a dark basement. Daniel felt it through the seat rails, a steady vibration that didn't ask for permission. Air 1, radar shows improvement along your route, approach said. Winds 20, gusting 25. Ruiz answered. Copy, RTB. She rolled her shoulders once, a quiet reset, then trimmed the machine with small practice touches. Keller leaned back from the window and wrote times on his kneeboard. Hold sortie, alley run, exit, return. The pencil scratched dry loud in the headset. Daniel watched the river unwind below them into an ink line, then widen into a black sheet, dotted with orange reflections from bridge lamps. A smell like wet metal. And hot dust rode the ventilation, the smell that always followed a hard flight. He breathed it in and let it sit. His mouth tasted like pennies. His tongue felt too big. Ray shifted, working a kink out of his neck. Feels like we aged a year out there, he said. Daniel cracked half a smile. Only a year. Ray huffed, then went quiet. The quiet didn't feel empty now. It felt earned. The cross of light wasn't in view. Daniel didn't look for it. He kept his eyes on the small, real things. The flicker of the seatbelt sign, the bead of water working a line down the inside of the side window, the faded scratch across Ray's visor from a training day years back. He let these anchor him. He didn't need the sky to write with light. He needed to arrive. Fuel 1 hour even, Keller called. Ruiz acknowledged. Plenty. A new gust shouldered them. The helicopter dipped and caught itself, rotor disc barking at the air. Ruiz added a sliver of collective, her boots pressing pedals as if coaxing a stubborn door. Stay with me, she said, the machine or herself or all of them. They crossed a highway. Red and white lights streamed below like two veins, one away, one home.